When I was a little boy,
Kada sam bio mali dječak,
I opened my Bible,
ja sam otvorio se u Bibliju,
tried to understand what God is talking to me.
pokušavao shvatiti o čemu mi Bog govori
And I was reading from the book of Revelation, chapter 3,
i čitao sam iz knjige Otkrivenja 3. poglavlja
verse 5.
i 5. stih.
He who overcomes
Onaj koji pobjedi
will like them be dressed in white.
bit će odjeven u bijelo
I will never blot out his name from the book of life,
i nikada neću izbrisati njegovog imena iz knjige života.
but will acknowledge him,
I priznaću
his name before my Father and his angels.
ime njegovo pred Ocem svojim i anđelima njegovim.
He who overcomes,
Onaj koji pobjedi.
he who wins in other translation.
Ili, kako kažemo i mi, pobjedi.
I come from a family, we have 7 children altogether, 6 boys, 1 girl.
Ja dolazim iz obitelji koja je imala 6 dječaka i jednu djevojčicu.
And we love sports,
I mi smo voljeli sport.
and lots of competition.
Bilo je uvijek puno natjecanja.
So it was fun, trying to be the best one in everything.
I ja sam pokušavao biti najbolji u svemu.
And I remember when I was in a school skiing competition,
I sjećam se kada sam bio u školi na jednom natjecanju iz skijanja.
and I became the 5th,
I došao sam na 5. mjesto.
I didn't really feel proud of myself.
I nisam baš bio ponosan na sebe.
Why is it that sometimes you always have to be number 1?
Zašto? Što je to što nas tjera da uvijek budemo broj 1?
So I went to church,
I išao sam u crkvu
and I was a young boy, and I had been fighting with the 7 sins in my life.
i ja sam bio mladić koji se borio sa 7 grijeha u svom životu.
And there on the door of the church, there was one of these old ladies, and she had one of these tracts,
I tamo na vratima crkve bila je jedna starija gospođa sa traktatima.
And in that tract it says 100 sins what the Laodiceans should repent from.
I tamo je pisalo 100 grijeha Laodiceje za koje se treba pokajati.
So now I didn't have only 7, but I had 107 sins that I was working with.
I sad sam shvatio da nemam samo 7, nego 107 grijeha s kojima se moram izboriti.
I did my best, but it didn't work.
I ja sam pokušavao najbolje što mogu, ali nije išlo.
The more I worked, the worse it got.
Što više sam se trudio, to je postajalo gore.
Maybe I become 20 years old or 30 or even older.
I došao sam do 20, do 30 godina starije i još iza toga.
Or when I'm just old enough, I'm too tired to sin anymore.
I ja sam smatrao, kada ostarim dovoljno, onda ću biti prestar da bih griješio.
What's your story?
Koja je vaša priča?
What is our story?
Koja je naša priča?
By that I mean, why do we gather here at the Adventist Church on Sabbaths?
I po time mislim, zašto se mi kao adventisti okupljamo
And not like in some other churches, they come and celebrate on Sundays.
a ne u nedjelju kao što to druge crkve rade.
Maybe somebody has asked you that question.
Možda je i vas neko pitao to pitanje.
Because they noticed that you go to church on Saturdays.
Jer su primijetili da idete.
So what did you answer them?
I što ste im odgovorili?
What did you say to your friend who asked you, why, it's weird, and everybody goes to church on Sundays, so why do you go on Saturdays?
Što ste rekli onom prijatelju koji me pitao, to je jako čudno, pa svi idu nedjeljom, zašto vi baš subotom idete?
So what sort of preconceptions do your friends have about you or your church?
Kakve pretpostavke vaš prijatelj ima o vama i vašoj crkvi?
If I were to ask from the prejudiced friends about Adventists or invite them to visit, what would they say, what would they see, and what would they experience in our churches?
Kada bih pozvao tog prijatelja s predrasudama u našu crkvu, što bi on u toj crkvi vidio i iskusio?
And I haven't done this research for a long time now.
I ja ovo istraživanje već dugo nisam radio.
But I've been finding out what is generally thought of as Adventists somewhere in the world.
Ali ja sam istraživao tome što ljudi generalno misle o adventistima.
And I've heard somebody say like this.
I čuo sam nekoga koji je rekao nešto.
And they ask us as Adventists, why is it so hard for some Adventists to love other people?
I oni su pitali, zašto je adventistima toliko teško voljeti druge ljude?
I don't know why they keep asking this question.
Ja ne znam zašto se ovo pitanje stalno ponavlja.
Why is it so hard for some Adventists to love other Christians?
Zašto je adventistima
Why is it that they're sometimes so critical?
voljeti druge kršćane, zašto su toliko kritično nastrojeni?
Why do some of our preachers emphasize the scary side of judgment?
Zašto neki od naših propovednika naglašavaju onu strašnu stranu suda?
The pursuit of perfection.
I onu potragu za savršenstvom.
Or that legalistic side of centered theology.
Ili teologija koja u centru ima legalizam.
Why is judgment sometimes more important than witnessing about God's love?
Zašto je sud ponekad važniji od svjedočenja o Božjoj ljubavi?
Why is it that some churches are just cold and dead?
Zašto su neke crkve jednostavno hladne i mrtve?
These are pretty dark thoughts, even coming from me,
Vrlo mračne misli, čak i kad dolaze od
who
mene,
is always positive and trying to think the beautiful side of all the mission.
koji sam uvijek pozitivan i želim gledati onu lijepu stranu misije.
But we can't hide the truth either, can we?
Ali mi također ne možemo i sakriti istinu, zar ne?
But it could be that these questions, what I just gave out, may not apply here.
Ali možda ova pitanja koja sam ja sada iznio se ne primjenjuju ovdje.
And if that's true, good for you.
Ako je to istina, onda odlično, bravo za vas.
A large part of our church, you don't fit that pessimistic description.
Jedan veliki dio naše crkve se ne može usuglasiti s ovom
Because there
pesimističnom
are
slikom.
so many wonderful and happy things happening all around us all the time.
Jer ima puno lijepih, prekrasnih stvari koje se dešavaju oko nas
There are-
cijelo vrijeme.
Just people here amongst us, which I've noticed, paid attention to that, is that there are so many people here full of love and joy.
Jer ja sam primijetio i ovdje koliko ima puno ljudi koji su puni ljubavi i radosti.
And it shows.
To se vidi.
I don't have to talk to you when I see that happening, through your face, when you enjoy, having that Christ-centered message or just falling in love with Jesus again.
Ja ne moram razgovarati samo da bih vidio tu radost koju vam donosi ta svijest o Isusu.
The book of Revelation talks about this church called Laodicea.
I otkrivenje govori o toj crkvi koja se naziva Laodiceja.
And it said about that they were neither cold nor fiery,
I piše da Laodiceja niti je hladna, niti je vruća.
somewhere in the middle.
Već negdje u sredini.
Ellen White also talks about one of our biggest problems in the future will be this Laodiceanism.
I Ellen White govori da će ta laodicejska problematika biti ključna za naše vrijeme.
So you may be wondering why is Ate talking about all this stuff.
I možda se pitate zašto Ate govori o svim ovim stvarima.
But I still need to go a little bit further. We need to go into our history a little bit.
Ali moramo ići malo u našu povijest, malo dalje.
When the Adventist church was born,
Kada je Adventistička crkva nastala,
much of the North America was already Christian.
većina Sjeverne Amerike je već bila kršćanska.
A revival and reformation went through the churches,
Desilo se probuđenje i reformacija koje je obuhvatilo crkve.
and Adventist preachers did not emphasize what everyone else did. They emphasized the gospel.
I adventisti nisu naglašavali ono što su svi ostalo naglašavali.
Everybody knew the gospel already because everybody was Christian.
Svi su već znali evanđelje, su bili svi kršćani.
But the Adventists focused more on the specific doctrines of the church to stand out from the rest of the Christians.
I zato su adventisti naglašavali one specifične doktrine koje su nas izdvajale od drugih kršćana.
And one of these emphases is the Sabbath, because no one else preached about
Jedna od tih
Sabbath.
stvari je subota, jer niko drugi nije propovijedao u suboti.
While Adventists understood the doctrine of the law in the same way as other Christians, the difference in Sabbath observance had to do with whether to celebrate the first or the last day of the week.
I iako su adventisti razumijevali zakon kao i ostali, postojala razlika u vezi četvrte zapovjedi, da li se subota svetkuje ili nedjelja.
Meanwhile, in the 1870s, some began to teach that Christians are not under any law.
I u to doba isto su neki kršćani počeli naučavati i to da mi nismo više pod zakonom kao kršćani.
And now, of course, Adventists saw the problem and reacted to that.
I adventisti kad su to primijetili, odmah su reagirali na taj problem.
But what made it even more interesting was when in one part of the country the law required Sunday to be a day of rest and the local government pressured people to do so.
I u određenim dijelovima zemlje već su bili donošeni zakoni protiv, to jest za svjetkovanje nedjelje, i oni koji su to kršili su dobivali kazne.
So perhaps for this reason, Adventist missionaries and evangelists ended up focusing almost exclusively on issues such as the law and the Sabbath and how they relate to end time events.
I onda su adventistički propovjednici se fokusirali ponekad gotovo isključivo na ta pitanja nedelje, subote i što to znači za posljednje vrijeme.
The rather unfortunate result was that the last generations of Adventists were brought up on a diet of law.
I jedna loša posljedica toga je da su te generacije bile odgojene samo na prehrani zakona.
And they heard very little of the gospel.
A jako su malo slušale o evanđelju.
And over time the gospel emphasis was lost.
I s vremenom taj naglasak na evanđelju je izgubljen.
And then we know Ellen White kind of rose up.
I onda znamo da se Ellen White
and these times, you know, when she kind of faced the pioneers and she said that many have lost sight of Jesus. This is what she said.
I ona se suočila sa tim ostalim pionirima i rekla, mnogi od nas su izgubili iz vida Isusa.
And in the 1880s, you know, Ellen White speaks of how the words of the Adventist missionaries were as dry as the mountains of Gilboa.
I ona je 1880-ih govorila kako su adventistički propovjednici propovijedali na način, o zakonu na način da su postali suhi kao planina Gilboa.
The emphasis had shifted from what Christ would do for us to what we could do for him.
I naglasak se prenio s onoga što Krist može učiniti za nas na ono što mi možemo učiniti za Krista.
In other words, justification by faith had become justification by law.
Drugim riječima, opravdanje vjerom je postalo opravdanje zakonom.
Let's shorten a bit of the history now.
Idemo malo skratiti tu povijest.
By the next 60 years, Adventism had undergone quite a change in emphasis.
I sljedećih 60 godina nakon toga, adventisti su doživjeli jednu promjenu naglaska.
With the death of Ellen White, our church was swept by a wave of fundamentalism after Ellen White.
Kada je Ellen White umrla, u crkvu je ušao fundamentalizam i dobio zamaha.
So what was left of the legalistic culture was supported by fundamentalism.
I ono što je ostalo od ovog legalističke kulture je bilo sada poduprto sa...
And somehow that created within our church a law-centered argumentation and behavior that even took a kind of a narcissistic characteristics with very oppressive lifestyle principles that were defended by the Bible.
I to je, dakle, proizvelo jednu vrstu mentaliteta u kojem je zakon i legalizam bio u centru i nastojalo je nekako tlačiti ljude sa principima ponašanja.
It also led to Ellen White's writings being quoted out of context and being, you know, people being hit over the head with both the Bible and Ellen White quotes.
I često se dešavalo da su citati od Ellen White vađeni iz konteksta i također i biblijski stihovi i sa njima se lupalo ljude po glavi.
And I was this young little boy who was thinking, what's sin, what is not sin?
I ja kao mali dječak sam razmišljao o tome što je grijeh, a što nije grijeh.
And in the midst of all this historical debate, if I just cut the short, you know, this history now.
I usred sve ove povijesne debate, da to malo skratimo,
a wonderful new Adventism has emerged that is not afraid to acknowledge its limitations.
Pojavio se jedan prekrasan novi adventizam koji se nije sramio priznati svoja ograničenja.
And this new Adventism is not afraid to talk about the hard questions and it's not afraid to exalt Christ whatever the cost.
I taj adventizam se ne libi govoriti o teškim pitanjima i također uzdizati Krista.
And under this influence of this new Adventism, legalism and fundamentalism have come to an end, I wish.
Pod utjecajem ovog novog adventizma, legalizam i fundamentalizam je završio.
There is one, however, flaw in this culture as well.
Međutim, i u ovoj kulturi postoji jedna mana.
The new Adventism sometimes reacts too strongly to the past, to the historical Adventist camp.
Novi adventizam je ponekad previše pretjerano reagirao na one mane iz prošlosti.
We emphasize the gospel of 1888, but we also sometimes downplay our history and the conversation we have had over the decades.
Mi smo naglašavali poruku evanđelja iz 1888. ali smo ponekad zapostavili ostale rasprave koje smo imali u povijesti.
We brought the gospel back into the right place.
Mi smo vratili evanđelje na pravo mjesto,
But we may have forgotten its holistic power.
ali mi smo možda zaboravili holističku snagu evanđelja.
If classical Adventism began with God is love and God is in our midst, that's the sanctuary message in a very short sentence said.
Ako bismo rekli da je klasičan adventizam ona poruka svetišta ukratko, a to je da je Bog ljubav i želi biti s nama,
The pre-1888 thinking changed God is love, God is in our midst from the I classes to the God's law and end time events.
I onda se onaj malo kasniji adventizam fokusirao na Božji zakon umjesto na tu želju Boga da prebije.
So the historical Adventists again took that previous package and added the spectacles of perfectionism into it.
I onda su stavili naočale perfekcionizma na taj protekli adventizam.
Then the reactionary Adventists, on the other hand, rejected all of the previous and abandoned that holistic-centered search for truth.
A onda nova reakcija onog novog adventizma je bila da se sve ono prošlo ostavi.
And this all led to the loss of the sanctuary focus of the original Adventism.
I zbog toga smo izgubili taj naglasak na svetištu što smo imali u izvornom adventizmu.
And that emphasis underlines the fact that the picture of God's love is holistic.
A to je da je slika Boga holistička.
The main message of Adventism is that Christ's love and work on the cross is such a holistic picture of the God of love that it cannot fail to affect us.
Glavna poruka tog svetišta jest da je evanđelje toliko snažno i holističko da ono ne može nas ostaviti nepromijenjeno.
And this impact is not compatible with coldness, indifference, or the fact that many of our churches are dead.
I taj utjecaj nije kompatibilan sa hladnoćom koja se nalazi u mnogim crkvama.
So why is it that so many of our preachers over the years have emphasized the cruel image of judgment?
I zašto su onda mnogi naši propovjednici naglašavali tu okrutnu sliku?
Or the pursuit of perfectionism or legalism?
Ili perfekcionizam i legalizam.
The answer is short.
I odgovor je jednostavan.
Because we have forgotten our story.
Jer smo mi zaboravili našu priču.
If our church stands for elitism, or that we are better than others, or if we are more interested in our own well-being than in God's character, then we are on the path of apostasy.
Ako mi smatramo da je naša glavna poruka da smo mi elita ili bolji od drugih, umjesto da se fokusiramo na Boga i njegov karakter, onda zapravo smo na putu otpada.
Instead, we now have the opportunity to change the course.
Mi sada imamo priliku da promijenimo tu putanju.
Is it possible to create a culture that is deeply at the heart of the gospel, but at the same time in harmony with our story?
Je li moguće proizvesti kulturu koja je u skladu i sa evanđeljem i također sa našom pričom?
And this is what I believe it is possible.
Ja vjerujem da to jest moguće.
The solution lies not with the church administration,
I rješenje se ne nalazi u crkvenoj administraciji,
nor with its leaders,
niti u vođama,
not with me,
niti u meni,
but with us together.
već u svima nama zajedno.
Together we must remember our story, build on it, communicate and fall in love with Jesus again and again, one after each other.
Svi zajedno se moramo sjetiti te naše priče, komunicirati, ugraditi na njoj.
So if we continue to look at our story only from our own perspective,
Ako mi na našu priču gledamo samo iz naše vlastite perspektive,
it becomes a problem.
to postaje problem.
We make God's story our story,
Onda Božju priču učinimo našom pričom.
our assurance of salvation,
Naše sigurnost u
the
spasenju,
perfection of our character,
savršenstvo našeg karaktera,
my habits, my culture,
moje navike, moja kultura,
my favorite doctrine or my favorite philosophy.
moja najdraža doktrina, moja najdraža filozofija.
And in the process we've forgotten that it was never about us.
I u tom procesu mi zaboravimo da ta priča nikada nije bila o nama.
The great battle is about the character of God.
Velika borba se vodi po
Who is
pitanju
God?
Božeg
What
karaktera.
is he like?
Ko je Bog? Kakav je on?
And in what ways does every theme in the Bible from law to grace, from Israel to the church, from past to the future, reveal the truth about God.
I kako sve ovo što smo čitali iz Biblije, od zakona do milosti, od Izraela do crkve, od prošlosti do budućnosti, otkriva istinu o Bogu.
When we remember our story, we can build on it.
Kada se mi sjetimo naše priče, onda možemo raditi na njih.
Never been a golden age in Adventism.
U adventizmu nikada nije postojalo zlatno doba.
The most important thing our pioneers have taught us is how to understand the Bible.
Najvažnija stvar koju su nas pioniri naučili jest kako razumjeti Bibliju.
From the very beginning they began to put together a holistic biblical truth that we call Adventism.
Od samog početka oni su počeli sastavljati jednu cjelovitu sliku biblijske istina koje mi zovemo adventizam.
Unfortunately or unfortunately, either way, their work was also not finished.
I na sreću, odnosno nesreću, kako gledamo, taj posao još uvijek nije završen.
And the church kind of went on rails, you know, sometimes.
I crkva je onda ponekad skrenula sa putanja.
The foundations are in good place, but the journey continues.
Temelji su na dobrom mjestu, ali put se i dalje nastavlja.
This is why what I'm explaining here today is that we need to rediscover ourselves once again.
I zato ja želim danas reći da mi trebamo sebe ponovno otkriti.
Every generation needs to find the reason why we exist, who we are.
Svaka generacija, svaki naraštaj mora otkriti razlog zašto mi ovdje postojimo, tko smo mi.
We always have the present truth that is found in who we meet and what we have to tell other people. So it's on Jesus Christ, the present truth, every time, every generation.
Svaki naraštaj ima sadašnju istinu koja ovisi o tome koje ljude susrećemo i kako im predstavljamo Isusa.
And when I personally find Christ in my life and I build my foundation on that, that becomes a strength in my life and also in my community.
I kada ja pronađem Isusa i iskusim ga u svom životu, to postaje snaga u mojoj zajednici.
And then those talents that I find in this church, musicians,
i onda ovi talenti koje pronalazimo u crkvi, glazbenici,
those who are artists, those who are poets,
umjetnici, pjesnici,
those who are writers, those who are bloggers,
blogeri,
those who are vloggers,
vlogeri,
those who are teachers,
učitelji,
none of them are threat to me.
Niko od njih nije prijetnja meni.
Because no one can control me.
Jer nitko mene ne može kontrolirati.
You are free and you are guided by the holistic narrative of Adventism.
Vi ste slobodni i navodi vas holistički narativ adventizma.
You can plant new churches, write new songs, create movies.
Možete stvarati nove crkve, osnivati, stvarati filmove, glazbu.
You can do art or use any resource to communicate our story in a creative way.
Bilo koje alate koje komuniciraju tu priču na kreativan način.
We are an Advent movement waiting for the return of Jesus.
Mi smo adventni pokret koji čeka Isusov povratak.
But we must live in such a way that we share hope with people who do not understand what is coming.
Ali mi moramo živjeti na takav način da dijelimo nadu s onim ljudima koji ne razumiju što dolazi.
Our message is not about judgment, it's about hope.
I naša poruka nije o sudu, već o nadi.
And if you end up talking about judgment, you talk about love.
I ako govorite o sudu, zapravo govorite o ljubavi.
We need to create activities and projects to reach the lost.
Trebamo stvoriti razne aktivnosti i projekte koje bi dosegnuli izgubljene.
Not just to entertain the saints.
Ne samo da bismo zabavili svete.
Just run programs.
Da bismo imali
That's entertainment.
Koje su zabava.
We need to create new material that engages people today in a way that reflects our holistic story.
Trebamo stvoriti nove materijale koje odražavaju našu holističku priču.
Not just doctrinal focus.
Ne samo doktrinu.
We need to be more present to people in need and to be ambassadors of justice in society.
Trebamo biti prisutni ljudima kojima je potrebna pomoć i biti ambasadori pravednosti u našem društvu.
We need to be the one showing that Adventism or God actually works in every culture.
Trebamo zapravo pokazati da adventizam, odnosno Bog, radi u svakoj kulturi.
At all times and through all different methodology.
U svako vrijeme i sa raznim metodologijama.
And if this is our worldview,
i ako je ovo naš svjetonazor,
then our foundations are strong and unity is found in respect for diversity and not in uniformity and micromanagement that has often been the used.
onda su naši temelji čvrsti i onda naša jedinstvenost nije uniformnosti, već u različitosti i nema mikromanagementa.
I do not have all the answers.
Ja nemam sve odgovore.
Nor do I claim that understanding what it means to say God is love and God is among us will solve all our problems.
Niti smatram da će razumijevanje toga da je Bog ljubav riješiti sve naše
The
probleme.
story in the end is not about us.
Ali priča na kraju krajeva nije naša.
It's about him.
Ona je o njemu.
Jesus is everything.
Isus je sve.
You remember my sin problem.
Sjećate se onog mojeg problema sa grijehom.
And after a while, I could tell a long story about that sin problem. I started understanding what actually sin means.
I nakon nekog vremena ja sam počeo shvaćati što to zapravo znači grijeh.
That sin is a separation from God.
Da je grijeh odvojenost od Boga.
We were born sinful not because we sinned when we came out of the mother's womb, but because we were born separated from God.
Mi smo rođeni grešni ne zato što smo sagriješili prilikom rođenja, već zato što smo odvojeni od Boga.
So we were born sinful.
Zato smo mi rođeni grešni.
Any Christian who does not spend time in the presence of God is living in sin.
Svaki čovjek koji ne provodi vrijeme sa Bogom odvojene od njega, on živi u grijehu.
And this was pretty tough, one. I thought sin was lawlessness, breaking the law.
Ja sam smatrao da je sin bezakonje.
A transgression is a consequence of sin, I was thinking.
Ja sam smatrao ovaj prijestup, to je posljedica grijeha.
And then I opened my Bible and started reading and understanding much more.
I kad sam otvorio Bibliju, krenuo čitati.
Was reading in the first chapters in the Bible about Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden.
I čitao one prva poglavlje o Adamu i Evi.
And already in that paradise, God approaches fallen man with mercy.
I Bog tamo pristupa čovjeku koji je pao sa milošću.
And when they just took from the tree,
kada sam uzeo sa drveta,
and they run away, thinking that I can escape from God, hide myself.
Da, kada sam uzeo taj plod i pobjegao od Boga misleći da mogu sam.
And instead of God being angry at Adam and Eve,
umjesto da je Bog bio ljut na Adama i Evu,
what have you done?
I rekao,
what did you do?
Što ste učinili ili meni što si učinio?
God says, where are you?
Kaže,
yes.
Gdje si?
Where are you?
Gdje si?
Did he lose them? No, he didn't.
Da li ih je on izgubio?
Where are you in your relationship with me?
Nije on doslovno njih izgubio da ih nije mogao naći, već...
Why did you go away? Come back.
Gdje si u tom odnosu prema
I miss you.
Falite mi.
Don't go away.
Nemoj otići.
This call of God is later confirmed by the commandment, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul and with all your mind.
I ovaj Božji poziv je kasnije potvrđen s time da trebamo voljeti Boga svim svojim umom, dušom i srcem.
Another call from God is found a chapter later when Cain had killed his brother Abel.
Drugi Božji poziv nalazi se u 4. poglavlju postanka kada je
instead of approaching God again after creation saying, what's happened,
Umjesto opet da je pristupio sa sudom, Bog je pitao što se dogodilo.
God says to Cain, where is your brother?
To jest, on je pitao, gdje je tvoj brat?
That is God wanting to give Cain the opportunity to tell himself what actually happened.
On je zapravo dao priliku Kainu da sam kaže što se dogodilo.
To tell what Cain's relationship was with his brother Abel and what was going on in their relationship.
On ga je do toga da shvati kakav je to odnos njegov sa bratom, što se tu desilo.
And this call of God is later confirmed in the commandment, love your neighbor as yourself.
I ovaj Božji poziv je kasnije potvrđen sa onom drugom zapovjedi da volimo svoje bližnje kao samoga sebe.
Confirmed by Jesus.
I Isus je tu zapovjed
What was the real priority?
Koji je bio stvaran prioritet?
Love the Lord your God.
Voli Boga svog Gospoda.
Love the neighbor as yourself.
I voli svog bližnjega kao samoga sebe.
Where are you?
Gdje si?
What is your relationship with God?
Koji je tvoj odnos sa Bogom?
Where is your brother?
Gdje je tvoj brat?
What is your relationship with your brother?
Koji je tvoj odnos sa tvojim bratom?
As a little boy, I played often with this big rubber ball at home.
Kao mali dječak često sam se igrao sa nekom gumenom lopticom.
This ball bounced back, really hard. It was one of these big ones.
To je bila ona od velikih poskočki.
And my father had just come from work. He was a chimney sweep, cleaned up chimneys, black man, white man with the black face when he comes from work.
Moj otac je bio dimnjačar i vratio se s posla sav crn.
I learned a profession. I was a little boy. I would always go work with my father.
Ja sam taj zanat naučio sa ocem.
I know how to clean up chimneys and I clean up ovens and everything. I love the work.
Naučio čistiti dimnjake, peći, volio sam taj rad.
So when my father was come back from work and he was sitting at the dining table.
I kada se moj otac vratio s posla i sjedio za stolom.
And my father's favorite drink was this buttermilk, this sour kind of a milk.
I moj otac je najviše volio piti ono kiselo mlijeko.
And he had this glass of buttermilk in his hands.
Imao je čašu kiselog mlijeka.
And I was throwing the big bouncy ball in the hallway.
A ja sam udarao ovu poskočku po
And I threw it so hard so that it bounced off the wall in the hallway and it went all the way to the kitchen into the cup of my father's buttermilk.
I toliko sam jako udario da se ta loptica odbila sve do čaše mog oca.
And I could see all of that milk, sour milk going over his clothes with the suit, sooty clothes,
I to se
bad.
Mlijeko razlilo po cijelom njegovom odijelu i svemu.
And I got scared.
Ja sam se tad uplašio.
And I ran as fast as I can.
Ja sam otrčao što sam
to the kids' room.
Mogao u dječju sobu.
And there was this bunk bed in this kids' room.
Imali smo onaj krevet na kap.
And under the bunk bed there was a toy box.
I tamo je bila ispod kreveta još jedna kutija sa igračkama.
And I pulled that toy box out.
Ja sam pomakao ovu kutiju.
And I went under the bed.
I skrio se ispod kreveta.
And I pulled the toy box back in.
I vratio kutiju natrag.
And there was I. What did I do? I was crying. I was just feeling so bad. Why did I do that for my father?
I ja sam plakao i osjećao sam se tako loše. Zašto sam to učinio svom ocu?
And I thank God that my father comes from that area of Finland where it's called that they're a bit slow.
I moj otac dolazi iz jednog dijela Finske gdje govore da su ljudi malo sporiji.
Yeah, they call from Hame. Hame people are slow.
I ljudi iz regije Hame su spori.
So my father did not react at all for a while.
I on neko vrijeme uopće nije reagirao.
No reaction.
Nema nikakve reakcije.
And I'm just crying.
A ja samo plačem.
What's going on?
Što se dešava?
And after a long time my father comes.
I nakon dugo vremena moj otac dolazi.
Where are you?
I pita, gdje si, ate?
He says to me.
On mi je to rekao.
I'm here, under the bed.
Ja sam rekao, evo me tu ispod kreveta.
And he says, just come.
I on je rekao, samo izađi.
And I pushed the toy box out.
Ja sam gurnuo ovu kutiju sa igračkama.
And I come out.
Izašao van.
And there's my father. He's just cleaned up a little bit of his clothes.
I tu se nalazio moj otac. On si je oprao ovu odjeću.
And he just reaches out his hands and gives me a hug.
I otvorio je ruke i dao mi zagrljaj.
And he says, it's okay.
I rekao je, sve u redu.
That is when I learned about who God is.
Tada sam shvatio tko je Bog.
Who the Father really is.
Tko je stvarno otac.
I learned about forgiveness.
Naučio sam o oprostu.
That even when I'm incomplete, when I'm not enough,
da čak i kada ja nisam savršen, nisam dovoljan,
there is a Father who loves me.
Postoji otac koji me voli.
Have you learned about your past, or are we repeating our history?
Jesmo li mi naučili iz naše prošlosti ili ponavljamo našu prošlost?
As a congregation, our spiritual renewal capacity and vision is not in what create programs.
Kao crkva naša snaga nije u stvaranju programa.
It's not that we have beautiful settings or camp centers or whatever.
Ne da imamo prekrasne zgrade ili centre.
But it's what strives towards, who God is.
Već da smo usredotočeni na ono tko je Bog.
Our unfinished daily life is at its best in how we reach out to Jesus and want to know the power of Jesus, the blood of Christ crucified.
Naš nezavršeni život je najbolji u tome kada se obratimo i posegnemo prema Isusu i želimo znati tu njegovu snagu i to njega raspetog.
And that's all that I am left with.
I to je sve ono što mi ostaje.
Jesus crucified.
Isus koji je raspet.
And Jesus is enough for me.
I Isus je dovoljan za mene.
And those who are broken.
I oni koji su slomljeni.
And those who are unfinished just like me.
Koji su nezavršeni kao i ja.
The word of the Bible in the Paul's writings in Thessalonians is one of my favorite texts in the Bible.
Pavao u Solunjanima kaže nešto što je jedan od mojih omiljenih tekstova.
In 1 Thessalonians chapter 2 verse 8 it says, "We loved you so dearly that we were ready to give you not only the gospel of God but also ourselves, so dear you became to us."
Prva Solunjanima 2:8 kaže, tako puni ljubavi prema vama, htjeli smo vam predati ne samo evanđelje Bože, nego i naše duše, jer ste nam omiljeli.
This is the power of the gospel at its best.
To je snaga evanđelja u najboljem izdanju.
If Jesus is everything to me and the center of my life,
ako je Isus sve za mene i središte mog života,
then Jesus is visible in my daily life.
kada je Isus vidljiv u mom svakodnevnom životu,
It shows up in how I spend my time and how I plan my life.
to se pokazuje u tome kako ja planiram svoj život, kako provodim svoje vrijeme.
If Jesus is with me in the workplace, it affects the kind of neighbor I am to my colleagues.
Ako je Isus sa mnom na mom radnom mjestu, onda utječe na to kakav sam ja kolega drugima na
If
poslu.
Jesus is with me in the store where I'm buying grocery, it affects how I plan my grocery shopping.
Ako sam ja s Isusom u dućanu, to se odnosi na to kako planiram svoju kupnju.
I met a friend in England who told me how, when he's in the shop, he thinks about whether he should buy a little bit more of food to feed others.
I sjećam se jednog prijatelja iz Engleske koji kaže da u dućanu razmišlja koliko više hrane treba kupiti da bi mogao nahraniti i druge.
So as a result, he and his family started an open Sunday lunch at their house where everyone is welcome.
I kao posljedica toga oni su nedjeljom otvorili ručak u svojoj kući koji je bio dostupan za sve koji su željeli doći.
And from that Sunday lunch, a new church was born.
I iz tog nedjeljnog ručka nastala je nova crkva.
In that block of flats.
U tom bloku apartmana.
When we live our daily lives with Jesus.
Kada mi živimo svoje svakodnevne živote s Isusom.
The power of the gospel is not super smart or sophisticated or massive, huge.
Sila evanđelja nije sofisticirana, super inteligentna.
The gospel is how I live my everyday life with Jesus.
Evanđelje je kako ja živim svoj svakodnevni život sa Isusom.
It's Monday Christianity.
To je kršćanstvo ponedjeljkom.
It's living outside my uncomfort zone, you know.
To je kada živim izvan svoje zone komfora.
So I dare to go where people are.
I ja se usudim ići tamo gdje se ljudi
Meeting the needs of your neighbor.
Susretati potrebe, ispunjavati potrebe svojih bližnjih.
Genuinely caring in a way that is not naturally possible for us, but requires experiencing God's love and grace.
I da mi je zaista stalo do drugih i to na način koji nije prirodan, ali se dešava pod utjecajem Božje milosti.
Walking with Jesus is not an easy life.
Hodanje s Isusom nije lak život.
And we'll never become finished.
I nikada nećemo postati završeni. Mi smo svi nezavršeni.
We are always unfinished.
Mi smo uvijek nezavršeni.
Like the church buildings we live in.
Kao i crkvene zgrade u kojima.
However, the power of the gospel is at its best when I too am doing things I don't want to do for people I don't want to be with.
Ali sila evanđelja čini da činimo one stvari koje ne bismo željeli činiti i to s onim ljudima s kojima inače to ne bismo željeli činiti.
The gospel challenges me to go outside my comfort zone and outside my everyday routine.
Evanđelje me goni da radim nešto izvan svoje zone komfora.
And every day my life surprises me in a positive way.
I svaki dan mene život iznenađuje.
God really loves me.
I sa time da Bog me zaista voli.
And I see miracles happening in the lives of my friends.
I s time što vidim čuda koje se dešavaju u životima mojih prijatelja.
And the biggest miracle is some of my friends give their life to Jesus.
A najveće čudo je da su neki od mojih prijatelja dali svoje živote Isusu.
And something that is in my life is mediocre, not finished, becomes something beautiful.
I nešto što u mom životu je prosječno, nezavršeno, postane nešto prekrasno.
There was a mother who said, let me finish with this story and then we'll close and we go home.
Evo želim još jednu priču na kraju ispričati o jednoj majci.
And there was a mother who was trying to teach piano for his son.
Ona je pokušavala naučiti svog sina da svira klavir.
And he wanted to motivate the son, to really learn how to play piano.
Željela ga je motivirati da zaista nauči svirati
But
klavir.
the son had other interests,
Ali sin je imao neke druge interese.
But the mother said, let's go to a concert.
Ali onda je majka rekla, idemo otići na koncert.
I know there is a really nice baroque concert tonight somewhere nearby, some
Znam
people went there.
Ovdje večeras u Varaždinu je lijepi prekrasni barokni koncert.
And that was a good idea of them to go to the concert.
Dobra ideja što su otišli na takav koncert.
So the mom took it to the big concert hall.
I majka je uzela ovoga svog sina u
And the
dvoranu.
ushers showed them to the place,
Vratar, redar ih je odveo.
And it's the concert of this big famous Polish pianist Paderewski.
I to je bio koncert jednog poznatog poljskog klavirista.
Paderewski. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So they're shown the places and mom sees, okay, that's my friend, my son, just sit here, just wait here, I'll just quickly go and see my friend.
I ona je posjela svoga sina i rekla, vidjela sam jednog prijatelja, idem samo kratko ga pozdraviti.
And what does the little boy do?
I što mali dječak radi?
Like what little boys do.
Pa ono što mali dječaci rade.
He takes a little walk.
On se malo prošeće.
And he walks, this is a beautiful place, wonderful concert hall.
Ovo je prekrasna koncertna dvorana.
And he goes to the front.
On ode na...
And he finds a door on the right, it says no admittance.
I prođe kroz ona vrata gdje piše ne prolaziti.
Oh, that's even more interesting.
To je još zanimljivije.
So he goes.
I on prođe.
And suddenly the lights start dimming.
I odjednom svjetla se
Mom goes quickly to the seat.
Mama brzo dođe do mjesta.
Where's the boy?
Gdje je dječak?
Boy is nowhere.
Nema ga nigdje.
And suddenly the big curtains open.
I odjednom se velike zavese otvaraju.
And there's the big grand piano on the stage.
Tamo se nalazi onaj veliki koncertni klavir.
And there on the seat there's this little boy.
I za klavirom sjedi ovaj mali dječak.
Playing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star.
I svira Svijetli, svijetli, mala zvijezda.
And at the same time the Paderewski walks in.
A Paderewski u isto vrijeme ulazi.
Mom's had a shock,
A mama je u šoku.
Heart attack.
Ima srčani napad.
Or at least a heartburn.
Ili je bar žgaravica.
Yes. So the Paderewski comes to the little boy.
I tako Paderewski dođe do malog dječaka.
And he says,
i kaže,
don't stop, keep playing.
Nemoj prestati, nastavi svirati.
And he reaches his left hand.
I on uzme sa svojom ljevom
and starts playing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star.
I svirati također ovu pjesmu.
Then he reaches out on the other side.
Pa onda uzme i desnu ruku
and he plays on his right hand another harmony of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star.
Upotpunjuje harmoniju za ovu pjesmu.
And everybody in the concert hall is mesmerized.
A svi u dvorani su hipnotizirani.
What a concert.
Kakav koncert.
God's plan for us
Božji plan za nas
is to make something of which is not so perfect in our lives.
Je da od nečega u našem životu što nije savršeno
and make something very beautiful
napravi nešto jako lijepo.
And everything what I wanted to say today for you, if I want to leave you something with.
I sve ono što sam večeras htio reći, ako želite nešto odnijeti sa sobom,
that you are very special in God's eyes, just the way you are.
Jest da ste vi jako posebni u Božjim očima, točno takvi kakvi jeste.
You're the most valuable person in this world.
Vi ste najvrednija osoba u ovom svijetu.
And God loves you so much.
I Bog vas toliko voli.
And he wants to make something really beautiful with your life.
I želi učiniti nešto zaista lijepo od vašeg života.
God wants to give you a call.
On nam želi dati poziv.
Call for mission.
Poziv na misiju.
And it's not going to be hard.
I to neće biti teško.
It's not something that you have to do.
To nije nešto što vi morate činiti.
It's not something you have to force on somebody.
Što vi trebate siliti na druge.
It's a love that just keeps growing.
To je samo ljubav koja nastavlja rasti.
It's like, I'll tell you one more story. It's like this one little girl who came to church.
Kao jedna mala djevojčica koja je došla u crkvu.
And this young little girl, this little 5-year-old girl leaves with mom from the church.
I ova 5-godišnja djevojčica ide sa mamom u crkvu.
And she says to mom, did the pastor say today that God is bigger than us?
I nakon što su otišli iz crkve, pita djevojčica mamu, je li propovednik danas rekao da je Bog veći od nas?
Yes, he did say that, yes.
Da, rekao je
Thank
to.
you for listening.
Hvala što si slušala.
And then she continues, did the pastor also say that God lives inside of us?
Ali onda je pitala, nije li pastor također rekao da Bog živi u nama?
Yes.
Da.
And now mom knew that there is something else coming.
I sada je mama znala da još nešto dolazi.
And the little girl continued,
I mala djevojčica je nastavila,
if God is bigger than us,
ako je Bog veći od nas
and if he lives inside of us,
i ako živi u nama,
shouldn't God come out of us
ne bi li Bog trebao izlaziti
in such a way that everybody would see God
na
in
takav
us?
način da bi svi vidjeli Boga u nama?
And that little girl had caught what really is the essence of God's work in our lives.
I ova mala djevojčica je shvatila suštinu onoga što Bog
The more
radi
we
u
have
našem
Christ,
životu.
the more we have Christ in our lives, the more we spend time with our communities
Što više imamo Krista u našem životu, što više provodimo vremena sa
and
našim
share our
zajednicama
life together.
i dijelimo život sa
We
drugima.
talk, we share,
Mi razgovaramo, mi dijelimo
and it changes our community.
i to mijenja našu zajednicu.
And we fall in love with each other. We fall in love with Christ once again.
I mi se ponovno zaljubimo u Krista i zavolimo Boga.
And we can't be quiet.
I mi onda ne možemo biti tiho.
And we just talk to our friends.
I mi govorimo našim prijateljima.
And we lead them to Jesus.
I mi ih vodimo Isusu.
And that's what is happening right now in Europe.
I to je ono što se upravo sada dešava u Evropi.
In the hardest parts of Europe where the secularism is so strong, we have at the moment, at least in Finland, young boys, young men, very actively involved and willing to find Jesus.
U jednoj od najsekularnijih područja Evrope, u Finskoj, mi imamo mlade koji dijele Isusa s drugima.
And I've been trying to think, why is that we have so many young men in Finland who are trying to find Jesus?
I ja sam pokušao shvatiti zašto ima toliko mladih koji
They're
traže
trying to find
Isusa.
identity in their lives.
Oni traže identitet u svom životu.
And I've been looking at our culture in Finland, you know,
Ja sam
there's been,
gledao-
feminism has been a very strong culture in our life.
U Finskoj
We love to be equal,
feminizam je jako snažan, želimo biti jedni.
but it led somewhere along the time that husbands kind of lost their identity.
Ali se desilo da su s vremenom muževi izgubili svoj identitet.
The husbands didn't know, who am I as a man?
Nisu više shvaćali tko sam ja kao
And
muškarac.
that has to do with our background.
A to ima veze s našom pozadinom.
So these young boys don't look up to their father. They want to be someone else.
Jer ovi mladići, oni više se ne ugledaju na svoje očeve, oni žele biti netko drugi.
I love equality.
Ja volim jednakost.
And you heard me say, I'm waiting for my God to call my wife. And I will follow her.
I
And I'm happy, I'm proud of going anywhere.
vi se sjećate da ja sam rekao da čekam na Božji poziv moje ženi i ja ću nju slijediti.
But at the moment, it's the both of us together listening to God's voice.
Ali trenutno nas oboje slušamo zajedno Božji glas.
And sometimes we don't hear it,
I ponekad ga ne čujemo,
but we are learning.
ali mi učimo.
And it's amazing to learn how to listen to God's voice.
I prekrasno je učiti slušati Božji glas.
And suddenly things start happening in our lives that we start getting rid of and what's not priority anymore. And we thought, how did that happen?
I odjednom mi vidimo da neke stvari prestaju biti prioritet u našem životu, druge postaju, pitamo se kako se to desilo.
And God says, just do it.
A Bog kaže samo
Follow me and I will take care of you.
Samo me slijedi i ja ću se brinuti za tebe.
Don't stop.
Nemoj se zaustaviti.
Keep playing.
I dalje za mnom. Amen.